On to our second case. This is one that we covered here on the podcast, but I wanted to revisit this because of the new information that's been released. And Alison, once again, I find this fascinating that the authorities have made this decision to open up and release the evidence files because the case is considered closed. And we don't see that a lot when cases are closed.
You're right. But I think that there has been an overall movement toward transparency in all law enforcement agencies across the country. And what is interesting about this case is that there were a lot of conspiracy theories where the police were too quick to say that this guy did it and stop investigating. And so what the police have done, and I actually am very much in favor of what they have done, and I support their decision, is they said, look, this is the evidence that we had. This is what we investigated. This is why we came to the conclusion that we did, which is this man did it, and he acted alone. And so I actually love the idea that they are being transparent. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people who said, oh, no, that just furthers the conspiracy. Mm-hmm. But in terms of really explaining what lengths they went to in the investigation, I like what's happening here.
Yeah, I also think that there's a degree of healing almost, that if you open up the books and you say, look, this was a horrible experience that the entire community felt. Of course, no one could possibly feel it like the little girl's parents and family. Right. No question about it. But I think when you do that, and if you take the time to go through what's been released, I think it could have a little bit of a healing component, saying, we know this was hard. We know this was shocking. We know the answers are still not satisfying.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, I agree.
So let's get to the facts of the case. Police have officially closed the case of a South Carolina first grader who went missing after school. This was last year, and then she was found dead a few days later. The KC Department of Public Safety is releasing the files and the evidence because they say it's closed. And again, as we've discussed, we think it's probably the right thing for everyone to be able to view these files. What's interesting here is that it doesn't really change the facts of the case, Alison. It really doesn't. Right. I don't think there's anything very new. There are details, but I don't get the sense that there's a lot new. And one thing that the case files absolutely don't answer, which I think is very hard for everyone, is the why.
The why.
The why. There's no why here. So February 10th of 2020, Faye Marie Swetlik, 6 years old, a little first grader, gets off the school bus on a Monday at 2:45. This is in Casey, South Carolina. She's playing in the front yard, and about an hour later, the mom says that that's the last time she saw Faye playing in the front yard. It would have been 3:45, so an hour after she got off the school bus. So mom says that when she realized that Casey was missing, she called the police. She calls the police at 4:55. Now, what happened is she did what most moms do. You look around the house, you look around the yard, you call all the neighbors, because while you are panicked, you're like, oh, she could have run across the street. So very reasonable, all very reasonable.
No, I mean, and as a mom, I can say that my first instinct would not be to call the police that my child had been abducted. My first instinct would say, oh, she went to go play with somebody. Oh, she found a hiding spot, something like that.
Exactly. And at 6 years old, that would be very appropriate. Yeah. Absolutely. So when she does call 911 at 4:55 p.m., more than 100 volunteers show up. The police, they begin an intensive search. Like by 5 p.m., even the FBI is involved. Yeah. Because now it's clear something...
She's gone.
She's gone, and she's likely been taken. So they do all these door-to-door searches. They're questioning everyone. They've got canines tracking everything. So that all happened on February 10th. On February 13th, so 3 days later, Faye's body is found in a wooded area not far from her house in a shallow grave.
Stop. Do you know who found her? The police chief.
Oh, that's right.
Isn't that interesting? I mean,
That's right. That's right.
The police chief himself found her.
And I'm not going to say it now, but how that shallow grave was put together and the materials that were used will go back to the evidence that police found.
Yeah.
So that's when they know they have a homicide on their hands. This is clearly a murder. So she's found dead.
I think that they find a polka dot boot.
Yes, her little rain boot in the trash.
And so that's when they start to search the wooded area in the back. And by the way, the distances between the little girl's family and the suspect to the wooded area are incredibly close, Anna.
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking hundreds of feet. I mean, close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see that a lot. And that I think is so hard when, especially for people who still have family members who have been abducted or presumed dead and are missing, the possibility that they could be so close to you the entire time.
Right in your backyard.
Oh, it's horrific. It's very frightening. It's very, very frightening. So here's what's also interesting, that Cody Scott Taylor, 30 years old, a neighbor, right, to Faye's family, is found dead at his home. So there's a lot going on all at once. You've got little girl has been found dead, right? This neighbor has killed himself. He's slit his throat. He's killed himself. You've got the little boot that she was wearing is found in the trash. Now, Cody Taylor had no previous criminal history. He had been interviewed by police the day before during the search. He allowed officers into his home. Police went back to the house for more, and that's when they found him dead. Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Take it.
That was strange for me. So, police are going door to door, right? So you're going door to door. You're trying to look and see if she's there. You're trying to eliminate suspects. And his roommate would later claim that there was an odor. There was an odor.
Yes.
And that he tried to cover it up with this spray. And, of course, look, police have a hard enough job. But the fact that they were in his home and that, according to the coroner, that grave was not dug and, the soil around it and everything else is pretty fresh. So I guess, right, we don't have all the facts, but according to the roommate, there was an odor in the days before in that house. And what happened there? I need to know more about the search of his home. Right. That wasn't released. I need to know some more.
Yeah, and it is 3 days, and of course there would be decomposition, but the thing is, I agree with you there. If the police had been in the house and by this time Faye's body had already been moved out, I find it hard to believe that experienced police officers would not have picked up on that odor. And I'm just wondering that the roommate is saying, oh, he's spraying air freshener, which he's never done before. Is it possible the police missed it? Yes.
And I'm not
but I don't know if they would miss the odor of death. That is just something I don't think police would miss.
Okay. And now I'm going to jump ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But he goes to Walmart, I think, and he buys all this gardening, potting stuff, which is something he'd never done. And he Ubers there, and they track down the Uber driver, right? They track down the driver, right, to taxi or an Uber. And the remark that the driver makes is, he was very evasive and he was nervous. And he didn't really, when I said, oh, do you know the girl that's gone missing? He didn't want to talk about it. And then he said, we never met. I don't know her. We never met. And so I have to believe that if he is showing signs of nervousness to the Uber driver, what was his interaction like with the police? It had to be interesting, right? I mean,
I think so. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, you and I, right? They come to our house. We say, come on in. Oh, how horrible this is. When they spoke to him, and that's why I want to know more, how did he seem? How did he sound?
I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. Clearly something was going on because the police went back again.
Yeah.
And of course, once she was found and the forensics were done, we can now start putting the pieces together because according to the Lexington County coroner, Faye died of asphyxiation within hours of her abduction, which means that if she disappeared that afternoon, that by that evening she had passed already, and they didn't find her for 3 more days.
Right.
So there's that gives you a timeline for, was there an odor in the house? Maybe he was just very nervous and was spraying that you know, the roommate smelled something, but the cops didn't. I find that a little strange. The other thing is, of course, there's her little polka dot boot that was found in the trash. There was a soup ladle, apparently that was used to, that looked like it had been used to dig for fresh dirt, which is a weird thing to use, is a soup ladle.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, and then there's the DNA. So DNA was tested and connected between the residents. This is what they said early on, between the residents, the male there, which would have been, Cody, and Faye. So now both of their DNA is found on the soup ladle, and her DNA is found under his his fingernail. No, his DNA is under her fingernails.
Correct.
Right. Cody's DNA is under Faye's fingernails. Imperative. Absolutely imperative. And remember, all of this was happening within 3 days, so not all that DNA would have been available, but That's right. This is what we end up finding from the case and the case files. So on July 6, 2021, the police department closes the case and releases the files and the evidence. And this is what they add. Quote, all evidence which we are giving to you today indicates that Cody Taylor abducted and murdered Faye Swetlik. We are now considering this case closed. Police say that she was killed by Taylor within hours of the abduction. The approximate time of death has been determined to be about 8 p.m. Police say that when they were searching those trash bins in the neighborhood, that they found Faye's boot, as we said, and that ladle, as we said. We knew that early on. And that's what led them to start the search. We're kind of getting now their narrative. There's the narrative we all experienced, and now this is their narrative. So the search of Taylor's home, because we didn't get all the details then, shows the Walmart receipt, which you referred to, that on February 13th, so that would have been 3 days after the abduction, 7 a.m, it goes to Walmart. Okay, 7 a.m. I always say that he bought a garden trowel, potting soil, and fertilizer. And Cody told an employee that he was starting a garden. That's what he said. Okay, kind of interesting. Then he takes the ride share, as you said, and that's, they're having that weird conversation that we touched upon. Here's what's interesting. Remember, I said to you at the very beginning, remember how that grave was put together and what was used in Faye's shallow grave. It had that potting soil. Who uses potting soil? Do you know what I mean? It was just...
But I did think about this. And to me, it indicates not necessarily the why, but that this was a very impulsive decision that he made on the spot. Because he didn't really have a plan with what to do with her body once he had killed her, because there he is going to Walmart buying potting soil and using a soup ladle. So I don't know if this brings the family any closure at all. And in fact, it's sort of, that if this was in fact a impulsive decision, maybe it's even worse, right?
Yeah.
But certainly it says to me that it wasn't well planned. It wasn't well planned. I think he got so nervous, and what do I do now? And he goes to Walmart 7 a.m. and buys potting soil.
Yeah. Also, they did much more forensics in his home, and they found that Faye's DNA was in a clothes hamper in that townhouse that he shared with the roommate, which is also very important because that means, she was likely in there.
Yeah.
Right. She was likely in that apartment. So according to the summary release, they say that investigators did search Cody's home 2 times, once on the day of February 12th. It's interesting, 2 times in one day.
Yeah.
On the 12th. Isn't that interesting? 2 times one day.
Right. And look, I am, these investigations are not easy ones. And whether they missed it or not, I don't know if it would, I don't think it would have changed the circumstance because the time of death, the coroner determined was that day, right? So,
she was already dead. Yeah. She was already dead by this point.
But it's something to consider, right? It's something to consider. How did they miss that odor?
Well, this is a quote from the police report when everything was released. It says, quote, "At the time of the consensual search, there was nothing overtly suspicious regarding the laundry bag and no evidence that made Taylor's home notable from the other residences in that neighborhood." Right. So they're saying
there was nothing that stood out.
There was nothing that stood out. They were doing their due diligence, but clearly something must have bothered them. This is what you say is missing.
They went back.
They went back in the same day. So clearly we're not getting the whole picture here. So the other thing is people who knew Taylor say that they didn't know of any previous interactions between him and Faye or anything that he may have said to indicate anything. There appears to have been, he had no previous criminal history either. Otherwise, they would have zeroed in on him immediately.
Right.
And it's still not clear whether he lured Faye away from the front yard or if he just snatched her. We still don't know that part.
But at some point, because his DNA is in her fingernails, we know there was a struggle.
Absolutely. Fighting for her life. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this, here is an issue that a lot of law enforcement agencies face, that multiple investigating agencies have tried to get into Taylor's cell phone, but they have not succeeded. As we all know, that it is near impossible if you do not have the password, and no matter the sense of urgency, no matter how heinous the crime, we are finding it impossible to get into people's cell phones. And I have a real problem with that. I'm sorry. I got a real problem with that.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree with you. And I'm going to tell you why.
You're killing me.
I know. But there has to be a balance between people's privacy rights, and the majority of people that have cell phones are honest, law-abiding people, and they have a right to store whatever they want in their phones without the government cracking their code and getting into their phone.
But when they are even convicted of the murder, I mean, come on now, Alison, there is a level here. There is a line we can cross.
I hear you, and it's called a warrant, and it's called a judge can issue a search warrant into a phone. I absolutely understand. And as far as I understand the law, if there is a valid search warrant, the provider, whether it be Apple or whatever it is, has to comply. But I do want there to be some protection for individuals. Let's go back to Russ Ferrara. Okay, let's just use him. Mm-hmm. He was arrested and wrongfully charged with murder. So there are people that get into the system who have done nothing wrong, and it's a huge invasion of their privacy. And I
understand the invasion of the privacy, and I respect that. Of course I do, but here's the other thing, and I realize this may not be a good argument, but anything I look at in my phone, there are dozens, if not hundreds of marketing tracking cookies, and everyone out there in the world can sell my information. They know everything I look at, what I buy, what I want to buy, where my car is parked.
Yep.
You all can collect all that information about me and my life, but God forbid I need help because something has happened to my child, right? Or someone has killed someone that I love, and then good luck getting any information then.
Right. But the distinction is you don't want it to be the government that's doing it to people. And by the way, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you in the sense that a judge better have the authority if the probable cause is there to issue that search warrant. And once there is a valid search warrant, the providers or whoever it is that can get into that phone better be willing to do it. I agree with you, but I need that.
The search warrant. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. But I feel like we have so many cases where search warrants are served, right? You're picking up the DNA, you're collecting all of this. So at this point, if you have search warrants for all of that, is it really that difficult to get one more search warrant for the telephone, for the phone records, and then to have the provider or the manufacturer open the damn device?
By the way, all they need to do is hand it to like a 9-year-old kid.
I know!
And somehow they can get into a phone, no problem. It's the most amazing thing in the world.
I know. Well, we could debate this forever, but I think, we basically, I think we basically agree that once it comes to the point where we're not just saying just for the sake of it, but there has to be a warrant like there is to search a home and to search your car.
Absolutely.
But I do feel that there's so much pushback, and I'm so sick and tired of those Apple billboards about protecting my privacy. It's like, yeah, that's what you're doing, Apple, right? That's what I pay a lot of money for. That's what you're doing because you track me.
When there is a thought in my head that, oh my goodness, that purse is so cute. I love it. Maybe I should buy it. How does an ad pop up? I don't get it.
Exactly. I think that there's the diagnostics in there that if your eyeball looks at it for more than 3 seconds, boom, we gotcha.
It's amazing.
Yes. All right. Enough on this because we're never right. Okay.
Interesting sideshow. Had to talk about it.
Okay. We got to move on.